How you doing? My name is Russell Thomas, and now we'll be going over the data sources with the graphs. The two graphs shown relate to each other in different ways. There's an obvious increase in both graphs and around the same time listed in the years. The graphs were increasing with the same percentage of GDP. Foreign-born share of the population are people who are not from the United States. So the first graph is just the growth of the U.S. GDP, starting from about the early to mid 1980s going forward. It's been a steady increase over time with the value being represented in trillions. There was a spike during the early not early during 2005 2006 range. But overall, the our trend of the U.S. growth, the GDP of the U.S. has been pretty consistent, which shows that our economy is doing well. And the total value of goods produced and services provided in a country have only been being increased since the early 1980s. The other graph is a graph of the foreign-born share of the U.S. population, ranging from 1815 to about 2013. As you can see, in the 1850 era to about early 1900s, it's increasing, and then plateaus a little bit, going ebbing and flowing between about 13% and 15%. But after 1905 1910, there's a steep and consistent decrease in foreign-born share of U.S. population. Now, I personally believe that this is due to the definition of what is a foreign-born person changing. In the early 1800s, a lot of immigrants to the U.S. were of European descent, and of European descent. With that being said, I feel like during probably 1920 forward, the definition of what was considered foreign-born changed, because now the Europeans had started cultivating and becoming the primary race and culture on this land, on in America. So it goes all the way down to about 5% until the 1970s, and once it starts to swing back up, reaching 13% by 2013, which is near where it was originally kind of ebbing and flowing. As I said, I believe by the 1970s, the definition of foreign-born has changed. It started representing more Asian people, Middle Eastern people, as well as African people, to define the term foreign-born. And from 1970 to 2013, it reached the same amount of growth that was sustained from 1850 to the early 1900s. So what can we interpret from these two graphs? Basically, regardless of how you feel, the growth of U.S. GDP, and if we take out the definition change of foreign-born share or foreign-born person, the growth of U.S. GDP and the growth of the foreign-born population has consistently coincided with each other. Changing the definition of if the original definition had been kept for foreign-born share, I feel like the graph would have continued the upswing. With the upswing continuing, it would have followed straight in line with the growth of U.S. GDP. But even if you want to take the graph from as where the growth of the U.S. GDP graph starts in the early 1980s, and where the foreign-born, when the definition changed, and in the early 1970s, you can still see a constant, I won't say one-to-one, but a consistent coinciding in growth of both graphs and both statistics, proving our point and proving the conversation we're having, that immigration, and citing the effects of immigration on the business market.